All right, so are you ready for some political drama? We're doing a deep dive into Canadian politics today, and let me tell you, things are getting a little spicy up in Ottawa. We've got some news articles and even a Reddit thread that's really blowing up right now.
Yeah, we're looking at kind of a classic power struggle here.
Yeah.
Classic minority government situation. The Liberals with Justin Trudeau are in a pretty tough spot, and Jagmeet Singh and the NDP are holding a lot of the cards right now.
So, like, what's the story? What's going on in Ottawa?
So the NDP basically, they've said they don't have confidence in the Liberal government, which, that's not really that unusual in a minority government situation, but it's their timeline for a potential non-confidence vote that's raising eyebrows.
Okay, so there's something more going on here. This is where it gets juicy.
Exactly. So to really get the implications of this, we kind of have to understand how these confidence votes work up in Canada. Basically, if the government loses a vote of non-confidence, that basically triggers either a new election or a change in leadership. And the NDP's votes are like super important here because they don't have enough seats to like actually topple the government themselves. But their support would be essential for the Conservatives or the Bloc Québécois to do it.
Gotcha. So the NDP has all the power here. But what is this about a suspicious timeline?
Right. So NDP MP Peter Julian has said that they'd think about supporting a non-confidence vote, but not until February, March. And that's kind of weird because Parliament resumes in January, so like why wait?
Yeah, that's a pretty long delay. I bet our Redditors have some theories about this.
Oh yeah, they definitely do. Some of them are pointing to a pretty interesting fact. According to the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, their calculations show that Jagmeet Singh is going to become eligible for a lifetime parliamentary pension on February 25th, 2025.
Oh, wow, what a coincidence.
Yeah, right. And the CTF estimates that this pension would be like $48,000 a year. And that could end up being worth a whopping $2.4 million over his lifetime.
Wow. Yeah, you can see why people are getting a little suspicious. Some of the comments in this Reddit thread are brutal. Some people are straight up accusing Singh of putting his own finances ahead of the needs of the country.
Yeah, for sure. There are some very strong opinions out there, ranging from, accusations of greed to people who are like, no, he's a good guy and the NDP is good for the working class.
Okay, so we've got a potentially unstable government, a huge confidence vote up in the air, and a really conveniently timed pension eligibility date. Talk about political intrigue.
It's definitely a recipe for some drama. And it raises some big questions, like, is the NDP delaying things so Singh can get his pension? Or are they using their power to try to get the Liberals to adopt policies that will help Canadians?
To figure all that out, I think we've got to dig a little deeper.
Absolutely. We need to figure out the NDP's motivations. Like, what are their goals? And what could happen if they do this? And we've got to look at the bigger picture, too.
Yeah.
Like how weak are the Liberals, really? And what are the other parties doing? So let's go back to the CTF calculations for a sec. It's important to understand, like how they came up with those numbers. They're looking at things like, years of service, average MP salary. But these pension calculations, they can be super complicated. And there are lots of different ways to do them.
So we shouldn't just take those numbers at face value.
Right, exactly. It's always good to be a little skeptical,
Yeah.
even if it's coming from a place like the CTF.
For sure. So you mentioned earlier that the NDP, they have a history of supporting policies that help the working class. How does this whole pension thing fit into that?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's definitely creating some tension there. Some people are saying that even if it looks like he's putting his own pension ahead of the needs of regular people, that could really hurt the NDP. But then others are saying, no, the NDP is playing the long game here. They're just trying to use their power to get some wins for Canadians.
So it's a risky move for the NDP. What kind of things are they trying to get from the Liberals?
Well, if you look at their platform and what they've been saying lately, we can guess that they're pushing for things like, a higher minimum wage, more affordable housing, maybe some stronger environmental rules.
So some big wins for Canadians if this works out. But what if it doesn't? What are the downsides here?
Well, there's always a chance that they could look weak or indecisive. Like if they wait months and months to do this non-confidence vote and then they don't get anything from the Liberals, people might feel like they were tricked.
And that could hurt them in the next election.
Oh, yeah, for sure. The Conservatives are all over this. Poilievre is calling Singh a hypocrite. He's saying if you don't have confidence in the Liberals, then do something about it.
So the NDP is stuck between a rock and a hard place. Pressure from all sides.
Yeah, classic political dilemma. They've got to balance their ideals with strategy, and you know what the public thinks.
It's amazing how this one thing has brought up so many issues. We're talking about confidence votes, pensions policy, debates the whole relationship between the parties.
It shows how complicated Canadian politics really is. And it's a perfect example of how something that seems simple can have huge consequences.
So we've got the NDP maybe holding the government hostage over their policy demands, but are the Liberals really that vulnerable? Could they survive a non-confidence vote?
Tough to say for sure. They'd need to get at least one of the other opposition parties on their side. Probably the Bloc. And that would come with a price tag, you know. Maybe concessions on Quebec's autonomy or federal funding.
So it's like a game of chess, everyone trying to outsmart each other.
Exactly. And the stakes are super high. Whatever happens here could really change the direction of the country.
Okay, so we've been talking a lot about the NDP side of things. But what about the other side? Are there any arguments in favor of what Singh's doing?
Well, a lot of Singh's supporters say that he's a good guy, a principled leader, you know. They say he's really trying to make life better for Canadians. They point to his record on things like affordable housing and pharmacare.
So they're saying he's not in it for himself. He actually wants to make a difference.
Right. They say that this whole pension thing is just a distraction. Like people are
Yeah.
trying to make him look bad and hurt the NDP.
Yeah, that's a fair point. It's important to remember that there are always different sides to the story.
Exactly. And it's up to each person to look at the evidence and decide what they think.
That's what we're trying to do here. Give you the info and the context so you can make up your own mind. We've laid out the facts, looked at all the different arguments, talked about what might happen.
Now, you might be thinking like, why should I care about all this political stuff?
Right, why does any of this matter to me? Well, it matters because what happens in Ottawa affects all of us, you know? Like whether it's confidence votes or social programs, these decisions have a real impact on our lives. They affect our healthcare, our jobs, our kids' education, basically the well-being of our communities.
Exactly. You know, it's easy to feel like politics is this like far-off thing that doesn't really matter to us. But the reality is that it affects all of us in some pretty big ways.
Okay, so going back to the NDP and the Liberals. We've said they're in this standoff, each one trying to get leverage over the other. But what if they can't work something out? What happens then?
Well, if the NDP decides to team up with the other opposition parties and they actually trigger that non-confidence vote, it'll probably lead to a federal election.
So Canadians would have to head to the polls and choose a new government.
Exactly. And that's where you come in. Your vote is your voice in all of this. It's your chance to hold these politicians accountable and decide what you want for Canada.
So it's not just about being informed, it's about actually participating in our democracy.
It's exactly. Informed and engaged citizens are the foundation of a healthy democracy.
Okay, before we wrap up, I want to go back to something we talked about earlier. That whole idea of politicians putting their own interests first, you know? How can we rebuild trust in the system?
That's the million-dollar question, and there's no easy answer. There are a lot of reforms that could help. Things like stricter campaign finance laws, better rules about conflicts of interest, more transparency in how the government makes decisions.
Those sound like good ideas, but wouldn't that take a lot of political will to make those happen? I mean, it's the politicians who would have to vote for those changes.
You're right, it definitely wouldn't be easy. But it's important to remember that change is possible. Throughout history, everyday people have organized and advocated and pushed for reforms, and they've made their governments more accountable and more responsive to people's needs.
So it's not about giving up or being cynical. It's about staying informed, engaging in constructive dialogue, and holding our leaders to a higher standard.
Exactly. And remember, this isn't just about one political party or one specific event. It's about the bigger picture. Creating a political system that truly represents us all. A system that is accountable and focused on the well-being of all Canadians.
Well said. So is Jagmeet Singh just trying to secure his own future? Or is he really fighting for the needs of Canadians? We've given you the facts, the arguments, the potential consequences. Now it's up to you to decide what you think.
It's your judgment, your voice, and your vote that matters.
That's all for this deep dive into Canadian politics. Thanks for joining us. We hope you found it informative and maybe even a little thought-provoking. Remember, stay engaged, stay curious, and keep asking those tough questions.